1 and 2. I'm going to break them up and have them come out weekly with the episodes so they can stay in conversation and stay fresh at the top of mind. I just think it'd be kind of pointless to review episode 2 now and then you guys get to it next week. No, I'm not doing that. So this will just be an episode 1 only review of Loki, even though I've seen the first 2. Another thing is I never reviewed a television show on my channel before or my podcast, so this will be interesting on how I do this, because television shows, especially reviewing them weekly, they are not whole stories. They are broken up into fragments. So how do you tackle that, knowing that some things will not be unanswered the week that you're reviewing? So I want to be very careful of that, because I know a lot of people review television like that. And, I'm sure there's critics that are way more qualified than me to do this. And so that's why it's going to be kind of a challenge to do that, since you are reviewing, moments in the story, not the actual, whole thing. And then for these reviews going forward, like the weekly ones for television, I think I'm going to break them up into non-spoiler and spoiler sections. And this isn't just for the Marvel shows. It will be for any show I want to review, or, just anything I want to review going forward. I'll just talk about it in general, whether I liked it or disliked it, pros and cons, and then kind of dive into some of the more juicy bits. Because when you're talking about something in the non-spoiler section, you have to dance around a lot of stuff, especially with Marvel property. And so, you want to be very careful on what you say. And then for maybe the spoiler section, maybe bring up some of the points that, to help your case, whether you're talking about a pro or con or something in the non-spoiler section. So I think it'd be kind of fun. And I'll give you guys a fair warning when I dive into the spoiler section. But I think that's the best way to tackle this. So let's begin. Episode 1 of Loki. To catch you guys up a little bit, because I never reviewed WandaVision or Falcon and the Winter Soldier outright. Fantastic. Both of them are. And me as a Marvel fan, I was even skeptical of how they would execute TV shows and draw these stories out into 6+ hours. How are you going to do that? How are you going to keep it fresh, and how are you going to keep it, potent still in this universe? Especially with stuff like Loki, where, spoiler alert, his last form that we saw, he died in Infinity War. I don't count Endgame, because that's a different Loki timeline. So I was like, how are they going to do this? And, of course, when you see the trailer, they're dealing a lot with time travel and trying to fix that. So I was like, I'm curious. I'm curious to see where they take this. What's the vibe going to be like? What genre are they going to shoot for? Is Loki going to fix any type of mistakes that he's done in the timeline, or is he going to make them worse? Is the Loki at the beginning of the show going to be different from the Loki we see at the end of the show? All these questions, because he is the god of mischief. It's going to be very fascinating to see where he goes. So with that, episode 1, to kind of keep it brief on the story, in Endgame, he takes the Tesseract and he bolts. So he's out. So he gets caught by the TVA, which is the Time Variant Agency. And Owen Wilson's character is basically like, listen, you caused a lot of tangents in the timeline through your buffoonery. We're going to charge you. You're going to be, there's going to be the crimes that you caused, you're going to be held accountable. And that's basically what episode 1 is. And it's more of a reflective episode for us as an audience member and for Loki himself. And it's also very sobering, because a lot of stuff is revealed that might tell Loki what his timeline holds. And I'm sure that would kind of freak anyone out to kind of see their future and their definitive end in their life. That would freak anyone out. So episode 1's basically a setup episode, where you have your atmosphere, your setting, your character setup. Just everything is just kind of the building blocks to this entire show. And I thought it was a pretty good episode. My favorite moments were, like I said, the more reflective stuff, the more character stuff that Loki is kind of seeing within himself. and seeing like maybe how he can change this so he doesn't have to go down the path that he has just witnessed. So yeah, it's a really great kind of setup for his character and his journey that he's about to take. And then, of course, at the very end, something is, kind of revealed to be the main thrust of the kind of journey that he goes on. And we'll get to that into the spoiler section. But I think in terms of like setting up the TVA, the production design, and the just overall kind of look at the TVA is fascinating because it's retro, it's ginormous, there's a lot going on, but at the same time, I feel uneasy about it. When you guys watch it, you'll understand what I'm going for, because the genre of this show is like a horror thriller. It's pretty fascinating. And it also has its, fantasy kind of elements, because we're dealing with, the god of mischief, and he has magical powers and stuff, but it's really fascinating to me that they kind of are going more into like a horror thriller vibe, more suspense thriller, but there's some horror elements sprinkled in there. And I really like that because I have no idea what's going to happen. I have no idea what's going to go on. And even after episode 2, I was still like, I still have no clue where they're going with it, which is exciting because the power that the TVA has and the power that LoKi has, they could shift the whole dynamic of this entire universe. So it's awesome. So the stakes are high. The character moments are great. Tom Hiddleston, what have we not said about him since 2011 at this point? He is LoKi. He embodies that character. He is just so enticing to watch on screen. You cannot take your eyes off of him. The newest additions are great as well. I love everyone in the TVA. And of course, everyone will, point out Owen Wilson as like kind of the lead in this show when it comes to the TVA and representing them. I think he's great. He reminds me of just like a detective that doesn't really go out in the field that much, but he like does a lot of desk work, but then sometimes he goes out. I don't know. He fits that role really, really well. And so I really enjoyed his presence. It's kind of interesting to see someone who is conniving and mischievous kind of go against someone who is also cunning, but also really smart and kind of like a soft talker. So it's almost like LoKi's arguing with himself, but it's a completely different dynamic. I really like it. They have really great chemistry together on screen. But yes, everyone in this show delivers in performances, but make no mistake, the man, the myth, the legend, Tom Hiddleston kills it in this role. So I think as a first episode, you're going to want more. And that is the beauty of Marvel just slapping those end stingers going, yeah, you want a little cliffhanger? We got you a little cliffhanger. And you're like, I hate you, Disney. So yes, that's kind of like my non-spoiler approach to episode 1. Great setup. And I think the overall feeling I'm getting from the TVA is kind of unsettling. And I think that's kind of the point, because LoKi deals a lot with illusions. And I honestly can't tell if the TVA is telling the truth or not. And so the kind of deception, who's telling the truth, like what's actually real and what isn't, that's at play. And I love it because I have the unsettling feeling. So something's going on, and I'll be curious to know where it goes. So that's the non-spoiler section. So I'm diving into spoilers, giving you a fair warning, and here we go. So the two things that I noticed in this episode that I wanted to talk about the most is that, one, Owen Wilson's character shows LoKi parts of his timeline that he's supposed to complete. For instance, his mother dying. LoKi goes back into the room and he sees the end of his tape. So he sees the end of his life when he gets choked out by Thanos. That's the end of his life. That's what we've all seen in Infinity War. But now, the 2012 variant of him has now seen his future. Now, I'll be curious to know where they take this version of LoKi, because is he still going to end up in the same place? Or is he, going to stray off into a different, they call it a nexus, the kind of like tangent off the timeline. And so I'll be curious to know if he gets lost somewhere in a dimension. I don't know. All these kind of questions are popping up, and I absolutely adore it. But that's where the kind of the character moments came in for me, because he realized that this has an end game to him, pun intended. This is not something to where he can play this like game forever. There is an expiration date on him, and I think that really kind of sunk into him. That really kind of let him, I guess, be more comfortable with playing along with the TVA and like going on these missions with him. And the reason why he goes on the mission, because not only is Owen Wilson a great salesperson to convince him to go, but the person that they're hunting down and the person that the TVA, this is the second spoiler that I found worth talking about, the person that they want to capture is actually LoKi. It's a different variant of LoKi. So LoKi is searching for himself. And so I thought that was a great cliffhanger, because I immediately want to watch episode 2, because I was like, oh, interesting. So he's going after a more like devious variation of himself. So he's actually like even worse than he is now. It's kind of like with the Thanos approach in Endgame. Current Thanos was dead, but like past Thanos was more untethered. He was more like aggressive, very warlike, vicious, and more brutal than the current version. And that was the one that was trying to destroy the Avengers in Endgame. So it's kind of like that in a sense, where there is a more dangerous version of LoKi out there, and the more current one has to help the TVA stop himself. So that was interesting, and that was the cliffhanger at the end of this episode. And I think a lot of people are going to be upset because they're going to be clamoring for episode 2, and we'll get into that review the following week. But I think for a first episode, pretty great, and I cannot wait to see where it goes. Please take me into some weird territory. Marvel always does with the time travel stuff and the like multiverse and different timelines and stuff. So bring on the weirdness. I really like it. So theme song's also really great. Title sequence is really cool. Once again, kind of provides a very eerie feeling, which goes back to my whole like unsettling, like there's just something that doesn't feel right. So yeah, great first episode. So let me know down below what you thought of episode 1 of LoKi, and let me know what you thought, and let me know if you're looking forward to the following episode. So this will be the episode 1 review of LoKi, and that will do it for this review. I'm Chase Lee. I'll see you guys later.